I want to start by naming that we gather at a critical moment when over 530 bills over the past couple of years have been introduced across the country targeting LGBTQ plus rights, particularly transgender people. Just recently, we've seen these executive orders attempting to erase trans identities from federal recognition, moving against both public opinion and basic human dignity. These actions mirror the very systems of oppression that Jesus stood against. Our reading from Genesis that we'll do today reminds us that we are all created in God's image. And importantly, I looked it up and I saw that the Hebrew word that God used here for God, the Hebrew word for God, Elohim, itself represents divine plurality and complexity beyond binary thinking. And so when we read that God created humankind in God's image, we are seeing a reflection of divine diversity in human form. This scripture challenges us to recognize and celebrate the full spectrum of human identity as a divine creation. The intersecting struggles that we face today, poverty, racism, homophobia, and transphobia, are not separate battles, but they are part of the same fight against systems that seek to divide and diminish God's beloved community. We know that 1 in 5 queer people live below the poverty line. Trans people are 4 more times more likely to face extreme poverty than their cisgender counterparts. 30% of trans non-binary youth report feeling unsafe, seeking medical care. And these aren't just statistics, they're stories of our siblings and faith being denied their God-given dignity. So what we're witnessing is a coordinated assault on human dignity driven by those who would use religion as a weapon rather than a force for liberation. These same forces that are pushing anti-trans legislation are often the ones that are fighting for or against affordable housing, healthcare access, and economic justice. They're using tactics of division and fear to fragment our communities and weaken our collective power. But just as Jesus' ministry brought good news to the poor and release to the captives, we too are called to build a movement that recognizes the abundance of love and the resources available to create a world where we can all thrive as our authentic selves. In this season of Freedom Church, we are reminded that our faith calls us to resist any interpretation of Scripture that justifies oppression and instead embrace the transformative power of our collective struggle for justice. And so this struggle requires us to think differently about how we organize and support each other. And so at the Kairos Center, Shelly and I have been working over the past year or so to pull together these lessons from the pandemic, examining how different communities and organizations work to fill the gaps in our society during that moment, how we broke isolation and created possibilities for organizing through mutual aid and care. And so we found that all these survival strategies can really evolve into powerful projects of survival that break through political barriers and create real change in society. And so we'll put out the report and some other resources and materials soon, but I wanted to share a relevant excerpt that spoke to the urgency of this moment. They say there's a heightened need for survival organizing as extremist forces take over our schools, churches, community institutions, and every level of government, unabashedly advancing a divisive, anti-democratic agenda through policy, religion, media, disaster relief, and other projects of survival. With a level of coordination, funding, and reach that far outmatches movements for economic, racial, gender, and environmental justice, Christian nationalists and aligned authoritarian actors are aggressively developing new leaders and growing their networks for the long term. They do not care about majority rule and have the resources to experiment widely, using our communities as laboratories for their dangerous political goals. In their playbook, there is no place too small or unimportant to be considered for full-scale takeover. As Aaron Scott, staff officer for gender justice and office of presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church, noted, I was giving a presentation on Christian nationalism in rural Oregon in the summer of 2023, and what local LGBTQ plus organizers there shared with me was that they had absolutely no capacity, either in terms of people power nor funding, to contend with the far-right out-of-state networks that were now pumping millions of dollars in local school board elections in tiny towns the rest of the country has never even heard of. Although the social justice ecosystem is not yet equipped to adequately contest on this terrain, there may be untapped potential to push back, reclaim lost ground, and establish newfound power through a vast network of projects of survival. Not only could this network provide an effective counter to these reactionary political forces, it could give new meaning to what a democratic society can and should look like today. And so over the next couple of weeks with Freedom Church, we'll hear from folks engaged on the front lines, learning as we lead, like Sierra was saying, each other through these multiple crises. So we'll hear strategies and analysis and political and moral insights into what it will take to push us into a world where we are not only surviving, but thriving. So thank you for joining us, and let's do it.